No judge is waiting for someone like you. Officer Caleb Morrison said the words beneath the carved promise equal justice under law, as though his badge gave him the power to decide which citizens belonged inside a federal courthouse. Dr. Marcus Reed stood calmly in the marble corridor, his hands restrained behind him, while his phone rested face up on the polished floor several feet away. The screen still glowed with a message Morrison had already read. Chief Judge Evelyn Carter and the judicial panel are waiting. Morrison moved the phone aside with the edge of his shoe and looked back at Marcus with a satisfied expression. Attorneys slowed as they passed. Court clerks glanced toward the security desk. A few people recognized Marcus immediately, but uncertainty held them in place. The morning had begun less than 10 minutes earlier when Marcus entered through the public doors wearing a charcoal suit, a navy tie, and the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to serious rooms. He had placed his briefcase on the inspection belt, passed through the metal detector, and presented both a federal identification card and an official invitation bearing Judge Carter's signature. Morrison examined the documents carefully. He saw the seal. He saw the appointment time. He saw Marcus's name. Then he looked at the black man standing before him and decided the evidence could not be trusted. These credentials require additional screening, Morrison had said. Marcus answered evenly. Call Judge Carter's chambers. They will verify everything. The telephone sat less than 3 feet away. Morrison never touched it. Instead, he asked where Marcus had obtained the letter and why he was attempting to enter a restricted judicial corridor without an escort. Marcus pointed to the direct number printed at the bottom of the page. One call will answer your questions. Morrison ignored the request. The truth was already present, but prejudice had arrived first. Imagine standing inside a building devoted to fairness while realizing that the man wearing the badge has judged your skin before finishing your name. Marcus noticed the camera mounted above the hallway. Its small red light remained. Steady. Officer Morrison, he said, this interaction is being recorded. Morrison glanced upward and smiled. Good. Then everyone will see me doing my job. Marcus studied him without anger. He could have ended the confrontation with one sentence. He could have announced that he was a former federal appellate judge, a nationally respected constitutional scholar, and the president's nominee to the Supreme Court of the United States. But inside his briefcase was a sealed misconduct report concerning courthouse security, and Caleb Morrison's name appeared across more complaints than any other officer's. Marcus had entered through the public checkpoint to understand how ordinary visitors were treated when no ceremony protected them. Now he understood. At the far end of the corridor, an older black man in a plain gray overcoat stopped beside the elevators and quietly observed the scene. Morrison did not recognize Judge Nathaniel Brooks. He did not notice the judge studying the camera, the discarded documents, and Marcus's restrained hands. He only saw another man he believed he could order away. And as Morrison prepared to speak again, he had no idea that the first witness to the end of his career was already standing 6 feet behind him. Judge Nathaniel Brooks remained beside the elevators, his expression unreadable as Officer Caleb Morrison turned toward him. Sir, keep moving, Morrison said. Brooks did not move. He looked first at Marcus, then at the federal identification card resting on the security desk, and finally at the telephone Morrison had refused to use. Have you contacted Judge Carter's chambers? He asked. Morrison's posture stiffened. This is an active security matter. That was not my question. The words were quiet, but they changed the air in the corridor. Marcus recognized Brooks immediately. Years earlier, Brooks had presided over one of Marcus's civil rights cases, a difficult appeal involving a black courthouse employee who had been denied access to his own workplace. Brooks had ruled that procedure could never become a disguise for unequal treatment. Now he stood in plain clothes, holding a paper coffee cup, watching that same principle being tested in real time. Morrison looked him over and saw only another older black man standing where he had not been invited. You need to step back, he said. Brooks remained 6 feet away. I will step back after you explain why verified federal credentials have not been verified. Morrison picked up Marcus's invitation and waved it once. Anyone can print a letter. Marcus answered calmly. The direct number is printed at the bottom. You have already said that. And you still have not called. A young court clerk named Rachel Kim had stopped near an office doorway. She had seen Marcus's photograph in the national news that morning and knew he was scheduled to meet the judicial panel. She also knew Morrison had been sent an internal arrival notice before the courthouse opened. Fear kept her silent for several seconds. Then Brooks looked toward her, not demanding anything, simply giving her the space to decide who she wanted to be in that moment. Rachel stepped forward. "Officer Morrison, Dr. Reed is listed on the official schedule." Morrison turned sharply. "Return to your station." "I checked the schedule myself," she continued. "Chief Judge Carter's office confirmed the appointment at 7:30 this morning." Morrison's face changed for only an instant. It was not surprise. Marcus noticed that. So did Brooks. A man hearing new information would have asked questions. Morrison did not. He tried to silence the person providing it. That was when Marcus understood the encounter was not merely prejudice acting without thought. Something had been prepared. Something had been expected. Morrison reached for Marcus's briefcase and placed it on the security desk. "This property will remain here until the matter is resolved." Marcus's voice lowered. "That case contains protected judicial material." Morrison smiled. "Then you should have brought proper authorization." Brooks set his coffee on a nearby table and removed a leather credential holder from his coat. Morrison raised a hand. "Do not reach for anything else." Brooks stopped and placed the credential on the table. Morrison opened it. The color drained from his face. United States District Judge Nathaniel Brooks. The hallway fell silent. Brooks looked directly at him. "Now call Judge Carter." Morrison glanced toward the elevators, the camera above the corridor, and the people beginning to gather. His confidence had not disappeared, but it had become calculation. Before he could answer, the elevator doors opened. Chief Judge Evelyn Carter stepped out with two members of the judicial panel and Lauren Hayes, Marcus's senior advisor. Carter saw Marcus restrained beneath the words "equal justice under law." Then she saw Morrison holding the briefcase containing the report he had every reason to fear. Her expression became still. "Officer Morrison," she said, "release Dr. Reed and step away from that case." Chief Judge Evelyn Carter did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Morrison stepped away from the briefcase, and the corridor seemed to tighten around him as every witness waited for his next move. He released Marcus, then tried to recover the authority that had already begun slipping away. "Your Honor, I was following enhanced screening instructions," he said. Carter looked at the federal identification card, the signed invitation, and the telephone sitting untouched on the desk. Enhanced screening does not mean refusing verification. Morrison glanced toward Rachel Kim. The schedule was not clear. Rachel answered before fear could silence her again. The schedule was clear. His name, photograph, arrival time, and meeting location were sent to security before the building opened. Marcus adjusted his shirt cuffs and said nothing. His calm made the facts louder. Judge Nathaniel Brooks picked up the invitation and placed it beside Morrison's access log. "You were offered 3 separate ways to confirm his identity," he said. "You rejected all 3. Morrison's eyes moved toward the camera above the corridor. For the first time, he seemed to understand that the morning would not be remembered through his report alone. Carter turned to the courthouse security director, who had arrived from the lower level. "Preserve every recording from this hallway. Suspend all deletion permissions. Officer Morrison is relieved from this post, pending formal review." The director nodded and requested Morrison's access card. Morrison hesitated, then placed it on the desk. The small plastic credential landed beside Marcus's identification, one representing authority that had been abused, the other representing truth that had been ignored. Lauren Hayes moved toward Marcus. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I am," he replied. Then he looked at Rachel, Brooks, and the silent employees gathered nearby. "But this cannot end with whether I am all right." Carter understood. She invited everyone directly involved into a private conference room while the corridor was secured. Marcus retrieved his briefcase and placed it on the long walnut table. Morrison was escorted to a separate office, unaware that the case he had tried to hold contained the very history that could end his career. Marcus opened the briefcase and removed a sealed folder marked Judicial Security Misconduct Review. Carter broke the seal. The first page contained 23 complaints filed over 4 years. Different dates, different visitors, the same officer. A black public defender questioned after presenting a valid credential. A retired Army officer delayed, while white visitors passed without additional screening. 2 courthouse employees repeatedly asked to prove they belonged in a building where they worked every day. Each complaint ended with almost identical language. Insufficient evidence, reasonable discretion, no policy violation. Brooks read the summaries slowly. One name appeared beneath most of the closing decisions. Deputy Director Thomas Franklin. Marcus placed his hand beside the report. This morning was not the beginning, he said. It was the first time the pattern happened in front of people who could not be ignored. Rachel looked down at the pages and remembered something she had tried not to question. 3 weeks earlier, she had seen Morrison deliver a storage drive to Franklin's private office after normal business hours. Morrison had called it training material. Now she was no longer certain. Carter asked if she was willing to make a formal statement. Rachel looked toward Marcus. He did not pressure her. He simply waited. She drew a steady breath. Yes, she said, because silence has already protected this long enough. Chief Judge Evelyn Carter closed the conference room door and asked the courthouse security director to preserve every file connected to Caleb Morrison and Thomas Franklin before either man could access the system again. The director reached for his phone, but Marcus stopped him with a quiet question. Who controls the archive permissions? The answer came after a pause. Deputy Director Franklin. Carter's expression hardened. Then remove his access first. Within minutes, the technology office placed a legal hold on the security database. No recording could be deleted, moved, or renamed without creating a permanent log. Rachel Kim sat near the end of the walnut table, preparing her formal statement while Lauren Hayes reviewed the 23 complaints. The language changed from case to case, but the pattern did not. Valid credentials were questioned. Black visitors were delayed. Witness statements disappeared. Video was declared unavailable. Each file looked separate until Marcus arranged the dates side by side. Then the system revealed itself. Imagine a wall built from ordinary pieces of paper, each one harmless alone, but together strong enough to hide years of truth. Judge Nathaniel Brooks recognized one complaint immediately. 18 months earlier, a black attorney named Isaiah Coleman had reported that Morrison continued questioning him after courthouse staff confirmed his identity. Brooks had personally referred the matter for review because Morrison's written account did not match what several employees remembered. The final report later claimed there was no usable video and no evidence of misconduct. I requested the recording twice, Brooks said. Franklin told me the camera had failed. Lauren checked the archive index. The camera did not fail, she replied. The footage was transferred to restricted storage 3 days after the complaint. No one spoke for several seconds. Carter turned toward the security director. How many people could authorize that transfer? 3, he said. Franklin, the technology supervisor, and me. Did you authorize it? No, Your Honor. Rachel looked up from her statement. The storage drive I saw Morrison carrying had a red security label. Training drives use blue labels. The detail was small, but Marcus understood its value. He asked her not to guess what the drive contained. Describe only what you saw, he said. The truth does not need help becoming larger. Carter watched him carefully. He had been restrained and publicly judged less than an hour earlier, yet he remained more concerned with preserving fairness than accelerating punishment. That was the difference between power and principle. One demanded immediate obedience. The other accepted the discipline of proof. The technology office soon reported that Franklin's account had accessed the restricted archive at 7:12 that morning, 18 minutes before Marcus entered the courthouse. He had opened 3 folders, including the file containing Morrison's prior complaints. Then, at 7:26, he sent Morrison an internal security message. Lauren requested a preserved copy. The message listed Marcus's full name, photograph, scheduled arrival time, and meeting location. It also included one unusual instruction: enhanced screening if unescorted. Carter read the line twice. Morrison knew exactly who Dr. Reed was. Marcus looked toward the sealed report. The morning was no longer a simple encounter shaped by bias. Someone had expected him, identified him, and prepared Morrison before he arrived. Brooks asked the question now hanging over the room. Why would Franklin risk targeting a Supreme Court nominee? Marcus opened the report to the final page. Attached to it was a notice showing that Franklin had learned the purpose of the meeting the previous evening. He knew Marcus was bringing evidence about courthouse security misconduct. He knew the report carried Morrison's name. Carter finally understood. They were not trying to identify you, she said. Marcus met her eyes. They were trying to stop the report from reaching this room. The room held its silence after Marcus explained what Franklin and Morrison had been trying to do. The report had not merely threatened their reputations. It threatened the system that had protected them. Chief Judge Evelyn Carter ordered the technology office to preserve every message sent between Franklin and Morrison during the previous 48 hours. Within minutes, a new timeline began to emerge. Franklin had opened the restricted complaint archive shortly after 7 o'clock that morning. He had reviewed the files connected to Morrison, then sent the enhanced screening instruction. At 7:29, 1 minute before Marcus entered the building, Morrison acknowledged the message with a single reply. Understood. Lauren Hayes placed the exchange beside the security log. This was coordinated, she said. Judge Nathaniel Brooks studied the records carefully. Coordinated does not yet tell us the full purpose. Marcus nodded. Then we follow the evidence. Rachel Kim completed her statement and described the red-labeled storage drive she had seen Morrison carry into Franklin's office 3 weeks earlier. The technology director checked the equipment inventory and confirmed that red labels were reserved for restricted archive transfers. Training material, as Morrison had claimed, used blue labels. Carter authorized a search of Franklin's office under the courthouse preservation order. No one rushed from the room. No one celebrated the new lead. The process remained controlled because Marcus insisted that every step be documented. Imagine standing inches away from proof that could destroy the people who humiliated you, yet refusing to touch it until the law had placed it safely in the record. 40 minutes later, a court administrator returned with a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a storage drive bearing the same red label Rachel had described. It had been hidden behind outdated personnel manuals in Franklin's locked cabinet. The technology director connected it to an isolated forensic computer. A directory appeared on the screen. Archived Morrison incidents. 14 folders opened beneath it, each containing video, witness statements, and original reports that had later been declared missing or incomplete. Rachel recognized Isaiah Coleman's name immediately. Brooks leaned closer as the first file opened. The video showed Isaiah presenting valid identification and calmly answering every question. Morrison continued delaying him even after another employee confirmed his identity. The original witness statement supported Isaiah. The final report did not. Someone had removed several sentences, changed the sequence of events, and replaced the conclusion with no policy violation established. Lauren compared the editing history with the account logs. Franklin had made the final changes. Morrison had accessed the file the same evening. Carter looked at the security director. How many other cases were altered this way? He answered quietly. We do not know yet. Marcus watched the names appear one after another. People who had been told there was no proof. People who had been asked to doubt their own experience. People who had walked away believing the building would always trust the badge over them. The final folder carried a different title. Read Arrival Protocol. Inside was a draft incident report created the previous night. It described an unidentified black male presenting questionable documents, refusing instructions, and creating a security disruption near the judicial corridor. Marcus had not even arrived when the report was written. Carter read the document once, then again. The conclusion had existed before the facts. The accusation had been prepared before the man. At that moment, the conference room telephone rang. Franklin had been located on the records level, attempting to enter the restricted archive after his access had been suspended. Franklin's failed attempt to enter the restricted archive changed the investigation from suspicion to urgency. Chief Judge Evelyn Carter ordered that he be escorted to a private interview room while the technology team preserved the computer terminal he had been using. No one accused him in the hallway. No one raised a voice. The evidence was allowed to speak first. Marcus remained in the conference room with Judge Nathaniel Brooks, Lauren Hayes, Rachel Kim, and the courthouse security director as the forensic review continued. The draft incident report concerning Marcus sat open on the secure monitor. It described resistance that had never occurred, questionable documents that had already been verified, and a security threat that existed only in the imagination of the person who wrote it. The timestamp was clear. The report had been created 12 hours before Marcus arrived. They wrote the conclusion before they created the event, Brooks said. Marcus looked at the screen. Then the event was never the purpose. The record was. Lauren requested a full communication history between Franklin and Morrison. The preserved messages showed that Franklin had instructed Morrison to delay Marcus, separate him from his briefcase, and keep him away from the judicial corridor until further notice. One message was especially direct. Secure the case before he reaches Carter. Morrison had replied, understood. The room fell silent again. The briefcase had never been a random target. Franklin knew the misconduct report was inside. He had known that if Marcus reached the meeting, the hidden complaints and altered records would finally receive independent review. Imagine realizing that the officer who judged you in public was not only acting from prejudice, but also following a plan designed to make that prejudice useful. Carter asked the security director whether Morrison had authority to seize protected judicial material. Not without a documented security basis, he answered. And there was none. Rachel then remembered another detail. The previous evening, Franklin had asked her whether Marcus would be arriving with staff or alone. At the time, she assumed he was arranging security. Now the question sounded different. Marcus asked her to state the memory carefully and avoid guessing at intent. The facts are enough, he said. The Inspector General's investigator entered with a preliminary report from Franklin's interview. Franklin claimed the Reed arrival protocol was only a contingency draft and denied ordering Morrison to take the briefcase. Lauren placed the preserved message on the table. Carter read it aloud. Secure the case before he reaches Carter. Franklin's explanation collapsed in a single sentence. Morrison was interviewed separately. He first claimed that he had not read the message. The access log showed he opened it at 7:29. He then said he believed the case might contain unauthorized material. The draft report, however, identified no specific threat. Every defense created another contradiction. Carter scheduled an emergency administrative hearing for 3 days later, allowing counsel, formal review, and independent oversight. Morrison and Franklin were removed from courthouse duty. Their access was suspended, and all related evidence was transferred to federal investigators. As the meeting ended, Marcus looked through the glass wall toward the corridor where the morning had begun. The building was quiet now, but the truth was moving faster than anyone inside it could stop. For years, Morrison and Franklin had relied on silence, procedure, and altered records. This time, the camera had remained on, the witnesses had spoken, and the report they tried to bury had already reached the room they feared most. 3 days later, the federal courtroom was filled with a silence that felt heavier than noise. Chief Judge Evelyn Carter sat at the center of the bench, with Judge Nathaniel Brooks beside her and representatives from the Inspector General's office seated below. Marcus entered with Lauren Hayes and took a place behind counsel, not as the president's nominee, but as the man whose treatment had exposed a system of altered records and protected misconduct. Rachel Kim waited near the witness table, holding a folder containing her signed statement. Morrison arrived in a dark suit without his courthouse credentials. Franklin entered through a separate door several minutes later. Neither man looked at the other. Carter opened the administrative hearing with a clear instruction. This court will not replace unfairness with revenge. We will follow verified evidence, and every person will have the opportunity to respond. Morrison's attorney argued that the encounter had been a legitimate security decision based on enhanced screening instructions. Franklin's attorney described the message about Marcus's briefcase as poorly worded but harmless. Carter listened without interruption. Then Lauren presented the hallway footage. The monitor showed Marcus entering peacefully, placing his belongings on the inspection belt, and presenting valid identification. His voice remained calm as he asked Morrison to call Carter's chambers. Morrison refused. Rachel attempted to confirm the appointment. Morrison dismissed her. Judge Brooks presented his credentials. Morrison continued delaying Marcus. Every excuse offered in the hearing weakened as the video continued. Next came the internal message Franklin had sent before Marcus arrived. Secure the case before he reaches Carter. Morrison's response appeared beneath it. Understood. Carter turned toward Morrison. Did you read this instruction before Dr. Reed entered the building? Morrison looked at his attorney, then answered, yes. A quiet breath moved across the courtroom. Carter asked whether he knew Marcus's identity at that time. Morrison hesitated. His name was included in the notice. And his photograph? Yes. And the purpose of his meeting? Morrison's voice dropped. Yes. The words settled over the room. There had been no mistaken identity. There had been no uncertainty. The official explanation had been constructed around a decision made in advance. Rachel testified next. She described the arrival notice, the red-labeled storage drive, and Franklin's question about whether Marcus would come alone. Her voice trembled at first, but strengthened with every fact. Judge Brooks asked why she had chosen to speak. Rachel looked toward the bench. Because I realized silence was not neutral. It was helping the people who controlled the record. Franklin denied directing anyone to falsify reports. Lauren then displayed the draft incident summary created 12 hours before Marcus arrived. It described Marcus as uncooperative and his documents as questionable. The conclusion had been written before the event. The accusation had existed before the man. Imagine seeing your character placed on trial before you have even entered the room. Carter reviewed the altered complaints, the hidden recordings, and the archive access logs. Then she issued her order. Morrison and Franklin were permanently removed from courthouse duty. Their access remained revoked. The evidence was referred to federal investigators, the appropriate licensing authority, and the United States Attorney's Office. Every complaint connected to either man would be reopened under independent review. Morrison looked toward Marcus, searching for anger or satisfaction. Marcus showed neither. Carter leaned forward. No one in this courtroom ended your careers today, she said. You did that each time you believed the truth could be edited. The ruling did not end the case. It opened every door that Morrison and Franklin had spent years trying to keep closed. Over the next 2 weeks, independent investigators reviewed archived footage, restored deleted notes, and contacted every person named in the reopened complaints. Isaiah Coleman returned to the courthouse for the first time since his resignation. He entered through the same public checkpoint where he had once been questioned despite carrying valid credentials. This time, Rachel Kim met him in the lobby. She apologized for not understanding what had happened when he left. Isaiah gave her a tired smile. Most people did not want to understand, he said. You decided to. His testimony became one of the clearest examples of how the system had failed. The original video showed him answering every question calmly. The altered report described him as evasive. His written statement had been shortened. A confirming witness had been removed. What happened to Isaiah was not hidden because evidence was missing. It was hidden because evidence had been edited. Similar patterns appeared in case after case. A retired Army colonel had been told his identification looked suspicious. A public defender had missed the opening of a hearing after Morrison delayed her at the checkpoint. 2 black courthouse employees had been required to show additional documents that their white colleagues were never asked to provide. Each person had been isolated when the incident occurred. Together, their stories became impossible to dismiss. Imagine carrying the memory of an injustice for years, then hearing a federal investigator say that the record finally supports what you knew from the beginning. Chief Judge Evelyn Carter ordered formal corrections placed in every affected employment and security file. Former employees received written apologies. People whose complaints had been closed were invited to submit new statements without fear of retaliation. Rachel received permanent whistleblower protection and was transferred to the Judicial Integrity Office, where her attention to detail became an asset instead of a threat. Judge Nathaniel Brooks personally contacted Isaiah and asked whether he would consider returning to public service. Isaiah did not answer immediately. Trust, once damaged, could not be restored with one letter or one hearing. Marcus understood that better than anyone. He met Isaiah privately and told him there was no obligation to return. An institution does not earn forgiveness by requesting it, Marcus said. It earns trust by changing what made forgiveness necessary. Meanwhile, Morrison's certification review moved forward before the appropriate licensing authority. The preserved messages, altered reports, and advanced knowledge of Marcus's identity removed any claim of confusion. His courthouse assignment had already ended. Now his professional license was at risk. Franklin faced a separate federal investigation for falsifying records, obstructing oversight, and directing the concealment of protected evidence. Neither result came through public humiliation. Each came through documents, testimony, and procedures strong enough to survive challenge. One evening, Carter found Marcus standing alone in the marble corridor beneath equal justice under law. The hallway cameras had been replaced, and new preservation rules were already in effect. Do you think this changes the building? She asked. Marcus looked toward the public entrance. Not yet, he said. A policy can change overnight. A culture changes when people stop looking away. Carter nodded. The court had removed 2 men from power, but Marcus knew that real justice would be measured by what happened the next time an unknown citizen walked through those doors. Morrison had believed the badge made his judgment final. The investigation proved that every badge must still answer to a record, every record must answer to the truth, and every institution must answer to the people it was created to serve. By the end of the month, the courthouse had changed in ways that could be measured. Every misconduct complaint triggered automatic preservation of video and access logs. No supervisor could close a case alone. Visitors who challenged a security decision received written confirmation that their complaint had entered independent review. The new rules were not perfect, but they made silence harder to hide behind. Marcus returned to the building on a clear Monday morning for his final meeting before the Senate confirmation process began. This time, he arrived through the same public entrance, carrying the same briefcase, without ceremony. The guards at the checkpoint greeted him professionally, checked his identification, and verified his appointment within seconds. Marcus thanked them and continued toward the marble corridor. He noticed Rachel Kim standing near the Judicial Integrity Office, reviewing a file with 2 younger clerks. She looked more confident now. Judge Nathaniel Brooks passed in the opposite direction and gave Marcus a quiet nod. Chief Judge Evelyn Carter waited near the courtroom doors. "The licensing board issued its decision this morning," she said. Morrison's professional certification had been permanently revoked after the board confirmed that he knowingly ignored valid credentials, followed an improper directive, and participated in false reporting. Franklin had entered a plea in federal court to charges involving falsified records and obstruction of oversight. Marcus listened without satisfaction. Carter noticed. "You do not look relieved," she said. Marcus glanced toward the words carved above the corridor. Relief would mean the problem ended with them. Later that afternoon, he stepped outside to find reporters waiting along the courthouse steps. They asked about his nomination, the reforms, the reopened complaints, and whether he believed justice had finally been served. One reporter called from the center of the crowd. "Would any of this have happened if you were not a Supreme Court nominee?" Marcus paused. The question carried every name he had read in the complaint files. Isaiah Coleman, Denise Walker, Raymond Ellis. People who had entered the building without cameras waiting outside and without powerful offices expecting them upstairs. "That is exactly why this cannot end with my case," Marcus said. "A person should not need a title before the truth becomes credible. A courthouse should recognize dignity before status, rights before reputation, and evidence before assumption." He announced his support for a permanent federal oversight standard requiring outside review of courthouse security complaints, whistleblower protection, and automatic notification when records were altered or moved. The proposal would later become known as the Reed Integrity Standard, though Marcus resisted having his name attached to it. He said the policy belonged to the people whose complaints had been ignored long before his own became public. Weeks later, Isaiah accepted a position on the Independent Review Commission. Rachel helped design a reporting system that allowed employees to raise concerns without going through the same supervisors they were reporting. Brooks reopened the case records that had once disappeared beneath administrative language. Carter required quarterly public accountability reports. None of those changes erased what had happened, but they gave the truth somewhere permanent to live. On the morning Marcus returned for his confirmation hearing, he stopped once more beneath equal justice under law. The words looked the same as they had on the day Morrison judged him before hearing him. Marcus understood now that promises carved in stone meant nothing unless people were willing to defend them. Morrison had feared the office Marcus might hold. Franklin had feared the report Marcus carried. But in the end, neither man was defeated by rank, revenge, or public outrage. They were defeated by the evidence they tried to bury, the witnesses they expected to remain silent, and the truth they believed they could edit. The badge had once decided who belonged in that hallway. Now the record answered back.